Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with grilled pastrami-spiced lamb top sirloin. That's right, welcome to another episode of Will It Pastrami. And as you may know, in past episodes, we've pastramied chicken wings and beef flank steak and even a duck breast. But this time I wanted to see if I could pastrami one of my favorite cuts of lamb, and that is the top sirloin. And I'll spoil the surprise right now and tell you I could. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with the aforementioned meat. And there they are. I have 2 lamb top sirloins. And these usually run about 8 to 10 ounces each. And besides being delicious and easy to cook, these do not require any prep or trimming. Alright, we have no bones or any connective tissue to worry about. And they are pretty much ready for the grill or pan as is. But what we're going to do for this particular preparation is go ahead and score the surface by making 4 or 5 slashes about a 1/4 inch deep. Go in one way and then the other. And we'll do that to both sides. And what that's going to do is create more surface area so that our spice wet rub really permeates the meat. Plus, once it's on the grill, that extra surface area is going to allow for more crustification and a deeper smoke penetration. So I went ahead and did that to both pieces. At which point we'll simply set those aside while we move on to create our pastrami-spiced wet rub. And for that we'll start with a little bit of olive oil, to which we will add a whole bunch of freshly ground black pepper, as well as an equally generous amount of ground coriander. And in case you didn't know, those 2 spices are the signature seasonings in pastrami. And then we'll go ahead and finish this off with some paprika, as well as a few shakes of the cayenne. And then last but not least, a big old spoon of kosher salt. And then we'll go ahead and take a whisk and give this a mix. And as soon as I started whisking this, I realized it was way too dry, and I was going to need some more oil. And I went ahead and added some in. And by the way, for a little tip, don't put in the oil first. We should probably put in our spices first, and then stir in enough oil until it's the texture we want. So do as I say, not as I just did. But anyway, once our wet spice rub is done, we'll go ahead and transfer our lamb in and sort of toss that around until it's completely coated. And that spice mixture is getting into all those nooks and crannies. And speaking of do as I say, not as I did, use your hands for this, since it will only take you like 30 seconds. See, I was using the tongs here trying to avoid having to wash my hands before I touched the camera again. And this ended up taking me like 5 minutes to do, which is ridiculous. But anyway, the point is, either way, make sure it's thoroughly coated. And once we determine it is, what we'll do is cover this in plastic. And we'll pop that in the fridge to marinate overnight, or at a very minimum 2 to 3 hours. Which is all I did, and it totally works. But either way, afterwards we'll remove those to a plate, and then do absolutely nothing. Alright, these are already seasoned, and there's enough oil on the surface. So basically, if our coals are ready in our grill, we're ready to cook. So let's head outside, where we're going to cook these things for about 8 minutes per side, or until they're somewhere between medium and medium well. And no, I didn't misspeak. That is the doneness I'm recommending you cook this to. And while this would still be good medium rare, there's a couple reasons why I want to go past that. Alright, first and foremost, I think the texture is going to be better. Okay, it's still going to be tender and moist, but it won't be quite as chewy as if you cook this rare or medium rare. And then the second reason, which is almost as important, since we're doing a little pastrami twist on this, I want that meat to spend the maximum amount of time over the smoky coals. So while we could certainly cook this over a hotter fire for less time to a more traditional medium rare, I really think this approach is going to work out better. But anyway, that'll be up to you. I mean, you are, after all, the wham bam thank you ma'am of your lamb. But somewhere between medium and medium well is my official recommendation. And of course, you can use the thermometer to check your work. And I'd say to shoot for somewhere around 140 internal temp. But truth be told, I just went by the time and the feel. And then once we've determined those have cooked long enough, we'll go ahead and pull those off. And we'll head inside and let those rest for at least 5 minutes before we slice them up. And speaking of letting them rest, do not under any circumstances discard any of those accumulated juices that may start to pool up on the plate. What we'll do is actually brush those on our sliced pieces later. But anyway, we will let that meat rest a little bit before slicing in. And you might be thinking, medium to medium well meat, that's going to be all dry and terrible. Well, you know what? It is not. This lamb is going to be incredibly moist and tender and juicy, which I guess is the same as moist, but I really wanted to say moist. And even this little end piece, which theoretically would be the most overcooked and the most dry, even that piece was amazing. So even though we went with a little longer cooking time for a firmer texture and more smokiness, as you can see, we did not dry out the meat. So I took one more bite to double check, before slicing up the rest. And then one slice, I went ahead and served this over some delicious green quinoa tabbouleh, which, by the way, was spectacular, and we'll talk about in a minute. So I went ahead and laid a few slices of lamb over that. And then, as I just mentioned, we'll go ahead and brush those beautiful drippings over the top, which is not only going to add flavor, but it's going to significantly increase the overall gorgeousness of the dish. And then to finish up, what I did is made a little sauce out of yogurt, mustard, mint, and garlic, which I garnished up with a little bit of cayenne. And that's it. That plate needs absolutely nothing else. But human nature being what it is, I decided to add one more thing, which was a little sprig of mint. And finally, our grilled pastrami-spiced lamb top sirloin is done. And while nothing really actually tastes like pastrami except for pastrami, that same sort of flavor profile really works wonderfully here. In fact, you could make the argument that because lamb has that little bit of gaminess to it, that it might actually work better with these spices than beef. But having said that, if you're not into lamb, this very simple wet rub would work with just about any meat you could put on a grill. And yes, in case you're wondering, it was absolutely magnificent paired with this green quinoa tabbouleh, which I promise to show you very soon, as long as you agree to stop looking at it now and go back to paying attention to this lamb, which really would be amazing no matter what side dish you paired it with. Although I am having trouble thinking of something that would have paired this perfectly. So stay tuned for that. But either way, I really do hope you give this amazing recipe, or at the very least cut a lamb, a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.